As the world's most ardent defender of Questor Soulsworn, I feel like it's time to go back in and check them out again. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast, and today we are talking about Questor Soulsworn. Since my last video on Questor Soulsworn, Badoosh, a lot has changed. We've gotten FAQs, we've gotten a whole new battle trait, and we've even gotten some new support, which is a first for any bespoke ever. So I think there's definitely a reason to go back and talk about my favourite boys in gold. But before we get into all of that, it's time for a little bit of shilling.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, as that helps me fight against it dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider signing up to my YouTube members or my Patreon, like all of these wonderful people on screen now. Badoosh. And if you don't want to dedicate yourself to a monthly subscription but still want to help the channel out, then feel free to throw me a coffee. But with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
So, Questor Soulsworn are kind of weird because they have a special rule. Very few factions in Warcry have an actual, just a always active special rule that isn't a battle trait, but these guys do, and it is called Heroes All. I am going to put it on screen now. Badoosh, give it a read, give it a gander, pause the video, and then come back once you're done. Long story short, every single Questor Soulsworn model is a hero, and they more or less ignore that limit in faction, which is kind of cool. Moving on to their battle trait, Questor Soulsworn have one of the best in the game called Heroes Without Limits. It reads, fighters with this battle trait can use multiple abilities each activation. Such fighters can use the same ability more than once and can use multiple abilities when they would normally only be able to use one. Where abilities grant bonus actions, such abilities are used one at a time and are fully resolved before another ability can be used. Heroes Without Limits is absolutely bonkers. This opens up Questor Soulsworn like nothing else possibly could. You can combine abilities in all kinds of funky ways. Maybe you use 3 doubles to onslaught 3 times and get a bajillion attacks on one guy. Or how about you stack Rush and then sprint to the other side of the board, or even use Inspiring Presence followed by their teleport quad to teleport one of your guys across the board and then immediately activate again once you get there. There are so many weird and wild combinations, and there is just no limit to what you can do. Only your dice limit you now, and this leads to some incredible plays and fantastic turns, but the risks are amplified just as much. If you invest all of your dice into one guy and he completely flops, well, it sucks to be you. You took the gamble and it absolutely did not pay off. Overall, this battle trait is outstanding. It fixes so many issues Questor Soulsworn have as standard by being able to just mix and match their abilities and how you stack them to make these incredible turns out of nowhere. Every turn can be potentially devastating as Questor Soulsworn, and every single model is a serious threat as well. Where necessary, in the next section when I go through their abilities, I will bring up Heroes Without Limits when interesting key combos crop up, so you're aware at a more relevant time. But moving on to their reactions, we have one of the best in the game called Swift Retribution. A fighter can make this reaction when they are targeted by a melee attack action. After the damage is totaled, but before it is allocated to this fighter, if it is enough for this fighter to be taken down, pick another friendly fighter. That fighter makes a bonus move or a bonus attack action. Swift Retribution is amazing, but it does have some very, very important limitations. The biggest one here is that it only works on melee attack actions, and people get this wrong all the time. The biggest mistake I see in Questor Soulsworn play is that people think it works on death. If you die, it works, and that is only half of it. You have to have been killed by a melee attack action. You can't have been killed by an ability. You can't have jumped off a building and died of fall damage. You can't have died to a shooting attack. None of those things trigger it. And that last one, shooting attacks, be very careful around models and warbands that have access to minimum range 0 weapons, as they are able to shoot into combat and that still counts as a shooting attack and not a melee attack action. As someone who has played with and against Questor Soulsworn, one of the things I go out of my way to do when I fight them is to never let them react. And if your opponent is savvy, they will do the exact same thing. This reaction is so good, people will play around it. They will target things that have already activated, and they will kill you with ranged attacks in melee to negate as many of your advantages as humanly possible. But if and when it does go off, the benefits are outstanding. A free move or free attack action anywhere on the board, even affecting allies. It's so good, and it's understandable why people will try and stop you from doing this as much as possible. It's just fantastic. But going on to their generic abilities, these are the abilities that everybody within Questor Soulsworn can use. I will cover specific unit abilities as I get to them in the next section. We start with their double Thundering Strides. It reads, pick another friendly fighter within 6 inches of this fighter. That fighter can make a bonus move action. Thundering Strides is the most important ability in Questor Soulsworn. This allows your warband to do so much. Being able to give your warband more actions, being able to get one of your guys to move into combat out of activation is so good for maximizing your damage, for maximizing your mobility. And with Thundering Strides and your battle trait, you can use this on multiple guys at once, or the same guy over and over again, and then catapult that one guy up the board 4 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, 16 inches potentially, all in one turn, without them ever actually having to do any moving themselves. Thundering Strides is also why you will see Questor Soulsworn appear as allies in so many order lists, because being able to move things is innately powerful, and the fact that it's this cheap, it's a flat 6-inch range, it is so good, and it's stackable. I use Thundering Strides all the time, and really you should too, because if you're not using Thundering Strides on the regular, you're really missing out on the Questor Soulsworn's potential, which is having a bunch of free things you can do every turn. Their second and final generic ability is called You Won't Even Slow Me Down, and this is another pretty darn cool ability. A fighter can only use this ability if an enemy fighter has been taken down by an attack action made by them this activation. This fighter makes a bonus move or a bonus attack action. This ability is fairly generic in Warcry, but it has a whole new lease of life within Questor Soulsworn because you can stack it. The trigger for this ability is you have to have killed someone this turn. So you could kill somebody and then pop You Won't Even Slow Me Down 3 times and then get 3 bonus attack actions on someone else, or move, attack, or attack, move. There's so many weird things you can do with this if you stack it, and is absolutely stackable. You can also combine this with other abilities, because again, Questor Soulsworn battle trait. One of the issues with these gamble abilities where you have to have gotten a kill before you get this is that you can't use Onslaught to increase your odds of getting that kill, because if you use Onslaught, you can't use another ability. Well, Questor ignore that. You could use Onslaught once or twice and then still use You Won't Even Slow Me Down to gain other benefits, like another attack action with all the benefits of the 1 or 2 Onslaughts you just had as well, which is pretty darn good, and just the tip of the iceberg for the crazy things you can now do within Questor thanks to their unbelievable battle trait and their fantastic selection of abilities. But it's time to turn down the heat a little bit and simmer for a while, because now we go on to their units. And we start with the Questor Prime. In my last video covering Questor Soulsworn, I was not a huge fan of the Questor Prime. For 170 points, he is one of the more expensive ones. I think it's actually the most expensive, or tied with the most expensive. And his attack stats are a little bit naff, and his ability wasn't that good. So my go-to thing was don't take the Questor Prime, but this has now changed. And that's because of his triple Searing Light is actually pretty darn good because it can be stacked. So against Horde warbands, this is what this guy's good for. He's good at doing damage to a lot of guys within 3 inches. It's 3 flat damage with Searing Light within 3 inches of this guy. Well, now if you've got 2 triples, you just do a flat 6, and that's really good. That is massively chunking everything on an objective. That's killing Noblards, Goblins, and Spiders, and doing massive damage to skeletons and humans and elves, right? It is incredible how much power you can leverage out of nowhere. Granted, it uses all of your dice if you double cast Searing Light. And then, of course, you still have your 4-4-2-4 profile, allowing you to then chip away at things that survived that. And yeah, technically the Questor Prime could always double up on Searing Light by doing Searing Light, Wait, and Searing Light, but that's a very low tempo play. This is very, very quick, and you don't waste any of your actions. You still have all your movement and all your attacks in combination with an immediate, guaranteed 6 damage in a 3-inch bubble, which is a big ass bubble. That's huge. That's a substantial range of which everyone either just dies or takes huge, huge damage. It's really cool, and definitely the Questor Prime is definitely worth considering now, whereas before, he was an easy skip. This guy's just a really good tech piece in pure Questor. I'm a huge, huge fan of him. Going on to the Errant Questor with Grand Blade, I am still not a huge fan of this guy. 4524 is a fine profile for cutting through chaff, but honestly, everybody's good at cutting through chaff now, right? Being able to stack Onslaught, you can just, you know, take a hammer and it's kind of fine. You can make up for the lower attack stats on other fighters within Questor and then retain better damage stats, right? The Grand Blade is indirectly, I would say, almost nerfed compared to everybody else, just because his actual profile isn't all that impressive. He does have a really cool ability though, which is shared with the Grand Axe and the Grand Hammer, which we'll get to in a bit, which is with the force of a Thunderbolt, a fighter can only use this ability after they finish a move action within 1 inch of 2 or more enemy fighters. This fighter makes a bonus attack action. With the force of a Thunderbolt is another way just to stack more actions. You move your guy into a group and then he gets to attack for free. There is some contention as to whether or not you can stack with the force of a Thunderbolt with a battle trait, and I am absolutely in the camp of that you probably can't. It does seem like the wording could allow it, maybe, but it feels a little bit off. I, for one, wouldn't try and push that. There are other things you can double up on. I wouldn't try to double up Force of a Thunderbolt because it's a little bit too ambiguous for me to say either way, honestly. And it's usually just better to play on the safe side in that case. But overall, the ability is good. I am just not a huge fan of the Grand Blade. There are better guys who can use this ability, sadly. Going on to the Errant Questor with Grand Spear. This guy is really interesting because he is the most expensive along with the Questor Prime, and he has no unique abilities. He is completely bland. His big selling point though is that 3-inch spear. This gives him a whole bunch of reach and makes him much harder to kill because he can stand out of range of things and just stab away safely, and retaining strength 5 means he hits reliably even if his damage is a little bit on the low end. That being said, he is crit 5 and not crit 4 like the Grand Blade and the Questor Prime, and that's pretty darn nice, but overall they do seem a little bit expensive for 170 points. I can get more damage from basically anywhere else, and because they have no unique abilities, I can get more utility from everyone else for cheaper. So the Grand Spear's 3-inch is a great reason to take it, but it's also one of the ones I am quickest to cut if I am over by 5 or 10 points. Moving on to the Errant Questor with Grand Axe. The Errant Questor with Grand Axe is weird because he doesn't synergize with their double with the force of a Thunderbolt, because that ability requires you to be within 1 inch, and this guy wants to stand 2 inches away to make use of the biggest benefit of the Grand Axe, which is that 2-inch range, and I guess crit 5. If you are going to take the Grand Axe, you're going in with the assumption that you likely won't be using with the force of a Thunderbolt, at which point, why are you taking the Grand Axe when you can just take the Grand Spear? And if you are getting within 1 inch, you might as well take the Grand Blade for the same price, because of the bonus attack. They're both strength 5, and sure, you lose a point of crit, but that extra attack more than makes up for that. So the Grand Axe is this weird in-between between the Grand Blade and the Grand Spear, but doesn't really fit anywhere as a result. So that's definitely one I would maybe give a skip as well. Going on to the final weapon variant, we have the Grand Hammer, and the Grand Hammer is the big Mama Jamba. Everybody loves the Grand Hammer because of that 3-6-3-4 damage profile. This guy hits like a brick, and of course he gains access to with the force of a Thunderbolt, allowing him to get into combat and swing away after moving, and with their battle trait allowing them to stack all kinds of things, the Grand Hammer really becomes your damage dealing murder piece, and now he's also quite good at doing so. Moving on to the penultimate Questor, we have the Errant Questor Duelist with Twin Blades, and this guy is a 5-4-2-3 profile with all the same defenses as everybody else. This guy is interesting because his damage is pretty bad. He gets a lot of attacks, very low crit. He has the lowest strength of the bunch, tied with the Relictor, who I'll cover in a second. He is not 4 damage, even though he can blend fairly well against chaff. His biggest draw, his biggest draw is Face Me Cowards, which is a triple. Until the end of the battle round, enemy fighters that begin their activation within 3 inches of this fighter cannot make disengage actions or end move actions further from this fighter. This ability is so good. It doesn't stack. There's no point in trying to stack it. It has no stacking benefits. But what it does, it basically ties down deployments. You can throw your Errant Questor into a turn 2 deployment and then pop Face Me Cowards, and not a single one of those people is really able to move. You can plonk this guy just outside of objectives or run past people who are trying to get objectives and then pop this and then they can't move further away towards it. There are so many weird little ways you can use the Errant Questor to slow people down, and you can chain this turn after turn after turn because the only way around it is to kill you. So if you stay 3 inches away, if you stay on the cusp of your range, they have to move into you, and then you can just disengage next turn and then do it again, and then they have to move again, and they're only getting 1 attack action off each time. And you've got toughness 5 and 20 wounds, and you can still attack before you disengage, which is what you should be doing because you'll be using this against horde warbands. Warbands you are outnumbered by. Warbands you have to play around with this. So if they are moving in to attack you to try to kill you, this is going to be their chaff, and 5423 is more than enough to blend through chaff. If you want to get a little bit spicy, give them +1 crit, make them 2-4, and your damage output will be noticeably higher. I am a huge fan of the Questor Duelist with Twin Blades, and until recently, I am one of the few who actually likes this guy. Thankfully, recently people have been playing with him more and to great success. This guy's a great ally, he's great within Questor, and that triple, whilst it might not be used every game, it brings so much utility that I can't part with my Duelist ever. He's just so good. He's won so many games, single-handedly won games because of that ability, and I can't ever let him go now. He's pivotal to my Questor play, and I love him to bits. And I wholeheartedly recommend that you give this guy a go too, because he has been largely overlooked since the Questor's inception because of his rather middling stats. The final Questor is the Soulsworn Knight Relictor, and this is another very common pick because his stats are just nice to look at. He's got a melee attack 3-4-3-4. It's low strength, sure, but 3-4 damage is a super tight profile. You'll be hitting through things really nicely. And his range attack is a no minimum range wizard bolt, essentially, at 2-4-3-5, which is also really good. A common way to run the Knight Relictor is to give him +1 strength on that range attack, have him stand back and be a bit of a range support. Another big draw to the Knight Relictor is he has no actual downsides in price, still being 165 points, and he also gives you access to their quad, which is really good, Translocation. Choose a friendly fighter with the Stormcast Eternal's rune mark within 3 inches of this fighter. Remove that fighter from the battlefield and then immediately set them up anywhere on the battlefield more than 4 inches from all enemy fighters. This is really powerful but also very expensive compared to most other teleports, which are either doubles or triples. Being a quad with restrictions is a hard sell. But that being said, it is very good in Questor Soulsworn because it allows you to do all kinds of funky little tricks, especially with their battle trait. For example, off the top of my head, using Inspiring Presence and then this to teleport somebody onto a treasure token and then have them immediately activate to then take it and run away. There's of course more ways of using it, but translocation is always good. Teleports are incredibly powerful in Warcry as a whole, and whilst this is, I think, the most expensive teleport in the whole game, it's still really good and worth taking that Knight Relictor for, in addition to all of the other benefits that Knight Relictor brings. Now, when it comes to allies, you'll often find that Questor Soulsworn don't often ally things in, they tend to ally themselves out. But since the new FAQ, we have a new addition to Thunderstrike that directly helps the Questor Soulsworn. And of course, I am talking about the Knight Questor. This guy is a 4425, which is very similar to the Questor Prime, just with +1 crit. And he has 25 wounds, not 20. And for all of that, he's only 5 points more than the Knight Questor. This guy is really interesting for 2 reasons. One, he has a really, really powerful ability. And 2, he removes your battle trait. So this whole video has been built on the premise that Questor Soulsworn have this amazing battle trait that can be used in so many ways to really open up their gameplay and really elevate them to the next level of competitive play. And now we have this ally who takes that away. So surely the Knight Questor is worthless. That you would never take the Knight Questor. You'd be wrong. The Knight Questor somehow is worth taking, which is insane to think about. He has an ability called Ordained Quest, which I covered extensively in my Thunderstrike Stormcast FAQ video, which you can find here, badoosh. So I won't go into too much detail here, but in short, you get to pick any enemy on the board or any objective on the board, regardless of range, regardless of line of sight, you just pick them. If you picked an enemy, your entire warband gains +1 attack when targeting that enemy in melee. If you picked an objective, then all of your Questor Soulsworn who are going to take that objective now count as 2 models. Now, if you're reading along, you can see that there are some pretty massive restrictions to this, and again, I go into much more detail on that in my other video, but Ordained Quest is unbelievably good. It is incredibly powerful, and it really helps Questor Soulsworn in the area they struggle in most, which is beating hordes, which is objective games because your warband is so small. Face Me Cowards helps with that, and Ordained Quest also helps with that, and there is definitely a place where you can use them both to great effect. You can have your Duelist deal with one part of the battlefield, whilst your Ordained Quest to deal with another. It's a very powerful combo, it's very controlly, and it really gives Questor this whole new flavour, and it's definitely strong enough to lose your battle trait to take, if that's what you want to do. With all of that in mind, going onto the list section of this video, it would be wrong of me to only show you one list, because there are 2 very distinct ways of playing Questor Soulsworn, and that is in faction plus battle trait or with allies. And yeah, I will cover them both, badoosh. So this list is comprised of a Questor Prime, a Soulsworn Knight Relictor, 3 Errant Questors with Grand Hammer, and the Errant Questor Duelist with Twin Blades. This has a little bit of everything I would like to see in a list. You have 3, technically 4 if you include the Knight Relictor and his high damage profiles, 4 very good damage profiles with decent strength that can go in and just smash face. These are your beaters. Those Grand Hammers are your beaters. Your Relictor is also a semi-beater. Your Questor Prime deals with hordes by blowing them the fuck up. And your Errant Duelist, he goes around and he ties things up with his Face Me Cowards if and when needed. This list is now my go-to list. If you wanted to make some changes and go even heavier on hammers, you can drop the Questor Prime and then maybe give that Soulsworn Knight Relictor +1 strength with the points left over. If you keep the Questor Prime, you have 10 points left over. Put those 10 points right into that Duelist to give him that 5424 profile, and you are good to go. This list runs like butter and has access to basically every single ability Questor Soulsworn have. You have the full toolbox ready to go, and you've got damage coming out of the wazoo, and you still maintain your battle trait and a 6-man body count. If you wanted to take a Knight Questor and Thunderstrike, then I would run this list. Badoosh. As you can see, it is basically the same list, but we've replaced the Questor Prime with the Knight Questor. If you want to retain your AoE Questor Boomba, you could instead drop that Relictor or one of the Grand Hammers and still be able to fit in that Knight Questor. But ultimately, this list largely plays the same. You just can't stack your abilities and you gain access to Ordained Quest, which does add a little bit of telegraphing to your list, but also gives you a lot of power in objective play. And in a pinch, you can also put Ordained Quest on an enemy to do more damage. And it plays fantastically. You are more bound to the rules of Warcry, but that is also a good thing because you aren't going to be tempted to splurge all of your dice on one guy and then feel like you've messed up later in the turn. It's a much safer way of playing, but it still retains almost the whole toolbox. If you replace a Grand Hammer instead of that Prime, you have the whole toolbox, including your Twin Blade, who has Face Me Cowards, which works wonderfully with Ordained Quest because you can do all kinds of wacky little combos across the board. And that's Questor Soulsworn. Since I started playing them, I have been in love with these guys, and that just hasn't changed. Questor Soulsworn are considered to be one of the most fun warbands in Warcry because of their ability set, and they're also tactically rich and rewarding, again thanks to their ability set, their small numbers, and their new support has made them so much better than they were before, and I already really liked them. They were already starting to see competitive success. Friend of the channel, patron of the channel, algorithmic demon slayer himself, Sable Saber, took a one-box Questor list into Warhammer World without ever playing them before and saw some really good success, seamlessly landing in the top 10. But with all these changes, this new support, their new battle trait, they are so much better. They're so much more well-rounded as a faction, and I am just so excited for more people to pick up Questor. And even if you don't pick up Questor to play Questor, they are still one of the best allies in all of Warcry. Questor models are everywhere in Order because they are such good utility pieces. Every single one of them is viable as an ally, and the package of taking a Questor plus the Knight Questor into any Order list lets you Ordained Quest and gain some tangible benefits by having two guys who can benefit from it at all times, making objective games easier in every Order warband in the whole game. So there's definitely a reason to play Questor now, either as allies or as their own bespoke faction. I am a huge fan, and I am rambling like crazy because I have so much love for Questor. They are just under Corvus Cabal for my favourite warband in Warcry, and it's a good time to be a Questor fan. It's a really, really good time. Put passion, rambling, and hyperbole out of the way. That is the end of this video. If you like what you saw, please remember to subscribe and leave a like. And let me know in the comments down below what you think of Questor Soulsworn. Do you think the new battle trait or the new support is enough to elevate them to that next level of competitive viability? Do you hate Questor Soulsworn? Do you love Questor Soulsworn as much as I do? Let me know. I am always down for a good old natter. But until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Boy howdy, it's me, it's Toast, and we are here once again with the post-Toast credits. As always, a huge shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Armour Enthusiast 7, Andy Morris, Girth Demon, The Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Sable Saber, Brioche, Steve Bean, The Houston Toad, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. A huge thank you for all of your support, and I will see you all next time.